Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is an interview with Mary Beth Storjahan, the founder of Workable Wealth in San Diego, California. So Mary Beth recently celebrated the launch of her new book called Work Your Wealth. I am really excited to have her on today to talk about the process of writing a book. I think a lot of advisors out there would love to write one and have dreamed about it, but just aren't sure what it actually takes to go from idea to launch, and that's probably what's getting in the way of them getting started. So Mary Beth gives us an awesome overview of forming a team of experts to help, how she held herself accountable to stay on schedule, how many hours it took her to write a book, how much it cost her, and more. She really did dig into all the various details of what it took to write the book. So I know this will be valuable for anyone thinking about going through this process. As always, you can access the show notes and additional resources at xyplanningnetwork.com/39. Also, remember to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Mary Beth. Hey, Mary Beth, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for anyone out there that has not gone back in the archives and listened to every episode of XYPN Radio, if you go back to episode 10, so go to xyplanningnetwork.com/10, and you can listen to an entire interview with Mary Beth about kind of her career, how she started her own firm, Workable Wealth, virtual financial planning practice based out of San Diego, and kind of hear all about how she has kind of taken on the world of financial planning by storm with her own firm. But today we wanted to bring Mary Beth back on to specifically talk about a topic that I think interests a lot of advisors, but it is an overwhelming topic, and that is how to write a book. So Mary Beth, you're now a published author.
Yes, I am, as of last Tuesday. So March 1st for anybody listening to this episode, whenever it airs.
When it actually goes live. So March 1st, so we're actually recording this on March 7th. It goes live in a few days. So we're not even 2 weeks into launch, but it has been a heck of a process. And I know I've been checking in with you kind of as you've gone through this process. So when did it actually start? So how long have you been, I guess, from concept to launch? How long have you been working on this project?
Well, I think I've been thinking about the project for a long time, but when I actually started to work on it, I'd say it's probably been about 6 months total from like, let's actually get the ball rolling, write the book, get the cover designed, everything, and kind of like up until launch. I'd probably say it's about 6 months, if not a little bit more than that.
So as someone, I myself have written an ebook, which, I guess we can define some of the differences just because we probably have our own terminology here that I don't know is necessarily standard. So you can write an ebook, which is just available electronically. It's basically a PDF.
Correct.
Or you can go all the way to, electronic books like for Kindle, that sort of thing, and then to an actual published hardcover, softcover book. So which version did you make for your book?
I went all the way to basically I printed like my book is printable. It's in like not like hardcover, but it's softcover book. Basically, it's available on Kindle and it's available in print format.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to talk about all the decisions that went into this. So, but as just kind of an overview, I know there are a lot of advisors out there that have a niche market. They have something that they've been, that they're passionate about, that they're the most knowledgeable advisor out there, or just have something they want to say. But it can be overwhelming to even consider the book process. So, I mean, you said you've been thinking about it for a long time. What was the trigger? I mean, what finally pushed you over the edge to say, hey, you know what? Now's the right time to get this book written?
Sorry, I'm laughing because you guys make fun of me like, oh, you had a baby and wrote a book. So right time, I don't know if it was the right time for me, but ultimately it was a matter of, okay, I've been writing. I enjoy writing. It's a way that I educate my clients and readers, and I've built a community around Workable Wealth. And so something that I got to see was, the blog posts are out there. The blog posts are getting reshared. The educational content is good. I'm getting feedback on that. And so probably, about a year and a half into it, I got those responses. I have my little email folder with positive feedback. That kind of helped me to see people are following my blog. People are interested in what I'm saying. And then it was also a combination of the number of people that were reaching out to me to have, consultations as potential clients, but they might not have been able to afford financial planning, or they weren't even really in a place to actually begin it yet. They maybe needed help with one thing. So the book kind of became the right time when I realized, you know what, I'm having these people reach out to me. I want to be able to point them somewhere. I want to be able to have something to refer back to as I'm doing speaking engagements. And so it's kind of like a matter of, all right, now is a good time to get it done. And that was basically, I had done a little bit of research. I had basically already built the blog around it. So that made it a little bit easier for me to be able to pull content from the blog and get it organized into some sort of like a book format as well.
So a couple of notes on what you just said. One was you actually did begin this book writing process and your daughter was maybe a month old. I mean, it was really, 6
really
months
early.
ago.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. She'll be 8 months in about a week. So yeah, she was a couple months old when I started the process.
It's the danger of giving an entrepreneur time. And now as a parent myself, I understand that any parent out there is going to yell at me for saying that you have time when your baby is born, but it's different when you just kind of like your sole focus is this little one that you're taking care of for a few months. And it like opens the door to like, oh, what are all these cool projects? It almost gives you a chance to like step away from the business.
Yes.
And can be dangerous.
Yep,
So
that's basically what happened was I had prepped my clients for time away and then I had time to think about the bigger projects that I wanted to work on.
The bigger pieces. But you mentioned a couple of reasons for the book, which I want to be sure we emphasize. One is that it is marketing, and we'll talk more about how you're planning to leverage the book. But, it is marketing to prospective clients. It's the ability to help prospective clients that can't necessarily afford your services. So it gives you wider reach. Mm-hmm. It establishes credibility for you doing consulting gig and speaking engagements and things like that you're suddenly a published author, or not suddenly, I'm sorry, that you are a published author versus not being. It gives you that kind of cred factor.
Right.
So it really is kind of multifaceted in its purpose, and it can help kind of build your brand.
Exactly. And there were so many pieces that went actually into the launch that even helped to enhance my brand along the way and the collaborations that I had. So even the launch process has really helped to elevate and put me in front of different audiences. So that's what's been really interesting about the process too. It's not necessarily even just the book, which I've gotten great feedback on and has been valuable. It's also the process of going through writing the book and learning and growing as well. I've leveraged those opportunities to create new relationships.
I love it. And you mentioned having a blog beforehand. And I think this is an interesting question because I'm a big lean startup guy. If for anyone out there that's looking at starting a business or launching a new product, go read the Lean Startup. It's such a valuable business book, but it really talks about don't take something to market until you're sure it's going to sell. And in many ways, your blog was kind of we call it an MVP or minimum viable product to take to market to see, is this even something that people want? Am I even the person that people want to be listening or reading? And even though, you probably didn't design your blog as doing this, but that was essentially what it became, was it was test casing the market to see, does it even want a book from Workable Wealth in Mary Beth's voice?
Exactly.
So do you recommend, looking back now, that if somebody's looking to write a book that they start with a blog? I mean, do you think that's a good place to start?
Ultimately, yes, I really do. I think people think they want to write a book and then they're uncomfortable writing. And so I always feel like if you're not comfortable writing a 500 to 700 word blog post on a, financial planning topic, then I think writing a book might be a pretty hard thing to accomplish. So I would say definitely start with a blog. And even by that, I mean, if you start there, the easy thing to do is, by then, if you know you want to write a book, break it down into the table of contents and then focus on writing blog posts that are associated with each topic from the table of contents. And you can actually, over time, start to pull your draft together.
I love that because I do agree that the blog is such bite-sized content. And as somebody myself who is not a very confident or comfortable writer, it takes me a really long time to write. Taking on an entire book project would be absolutely overwhelming. Like I wouldn't even know where to start. And so that's a great point that you can use your blog as a way to start writing content. It's almost like putting yourself on an editorial calendar to hold yourself accountable to just get out, 600 to 700 word blog post each week around kind of a central topic. But you also were able to build a little bit of a fan following. I mean, you already have a newsletter list. You have social media followers. You've built a brand kind of around Workable Wealth to then market the book to.
Exactly.
Because as we'll talk about, writing the book is only one step in the process.
Yeah.
You got to sell it. So
Exactly.
Do you mind sharing? I mean, how big is your community now? Because you have a couple of communities that we've already mentioned, and a Facebook group and some other things going on.
Yeah. So my newsletter list is over probably about 2,500 across, I think 2,500. Facebook group is a couple hundred. And then Twitter following is about close to 4,000, I think. So there's people in different pockets along the way. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also, so it's not just my communities, me personally, part of my marketing strategy is being very active in other Facebook groups. And again, those Facebook groups are targeted towards my niche, which happens to be like, lots of women, creative entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. So I'm very active in those groups. And by being active in those, I kind of become like a finance expert. So I get called upon, other people will tag me in if there's somebody has a personal finance question. And so while those aren't my direct community, I have other people who know me who are tagging me in. So I'm known in those communities as well. That I've been able to leverage those as a part of the launch also.
Yeah, you're leveraging other people's communities essentially and becoming, which is great because if you can leverage 10 other people's communities and they have the same following size you do, well, suddenly you've just, taken your 10,000 followers and turned it into 100,000, people that are hearing what you're saying.
Exactly.
Which is great.
Yep.
So you made the decision to write the book. Obviously, this is something you've been thinking about. You've got the blog, so you've been working on some various, some of the content is there. What was the first step, other than making the commitment, you're finally going to write the book? What was kind of the next step towards, heading in the direction of actually writing a book?
So I toyed around with like what I wanted the book to address and how I wanted it to be built and like what format I wanted it in. So once I decided, okay, I'm going to make this happen, then I spent probably about a week or so actually researching like other personal finance books that are out there. Like what else is, because there's tons of personal finance books and it's a matter of like, why add something when there's already a ton out there? What's the point of adding more? Like, are you really doing anything new? Were you saying it differently or whatever? So I did some research and I started pulling other personal finance books. I looked at their table of contents. I looked at how they were arranged, the questions they answered. And from there, looking at how other things were done, then I went back to think about, okay, well, how are what are the questions my clients come to me with? What are they looking to do? What do they need to be educated on? And then that's basically how I drafted the table of contents to work your wealth. So from there, basically I drafted my table of contents, and essentially Work Your Wealth it's 9 steps to making smarter choices with your money. And what it does is it just coaches clients through building their own financial plan. So I basically decided at that point in time that each chapter would then close with a list of money moves they would make in terms of like establishing your goals, create your spending plan, your debt pay down plan, all of these things. So that was my next step, was a table of contents broken down by chapter. And then it was time to basically be held accountable to actually, writing it.
I love that you make the point that how are you going to be different in this space? Because to your point, the personal finance marketplace is flooded with content. We know as financial advisors, a lot of it is not ideal content, but it's still out there and people are reading and buying these books, many of them bestsellers. Yep. So how are you going to be different? And I think that's a really cool idea to go out, take a look and see how are they arranging it? What questions are they answering for their readers? And then ask yourself, what can I answer? And you're probably noticing that a lot of the questions you answer are the things that your clients asked you that no one else seems to ever answer for whatever reason. But I would also add, financial advisors tend to, I've heard this many times when it comes to just blogging. I'm sure it happens when folks are writing a book and it's like, why me? Like, why do people want to hear from me? And the answer is, you have something unique to share. Even if you're saying the same thing somebody else is saying, people want to hear it from you sometimes. They don't want to hear it from the other person because they trust you, they like you, they follow you, whatever the reason is. And we're actually going to have Carl Richards on this show here in a few more episodes talking about the imposter syndrome, which will actually address some of this in terms of talking through, the why me, because I think a lot of us struggle with like, why am I good enough to write this book? Like, am I good enough who picked me to be the person that spreads all of this information, because is that something you dealt with, I guess, when you were writing the book?
Okay, so I dealt with it. When I was writing the book, I think it was fine. I actually got the book delivered. The proofs showed up on my doorstep and I opened the box and I was like, it's not big enough. It's not long enough. Like, I wasn't even like happy. I was like, this feels flimsy. Like, people aren't going to buy this. Like, it was automatically like negative. There was no excitement. It took like 2 days of like people being like, it's fine. Like, who's going to read a 250-page personal finance book? Like, your audience would not read that. And like, because the content is great. Like, the way it's a beautiful book, like, it's fantastic. But I was totally in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this isn't good enough. And it totally is. So it took me, but that was like my initial total imposter syndrome. totally just like spiral, but then you pick yourself up out of it, definitely like move forward. But I think everybody has it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that interview and digging in a little bit. Carl talked at our conference last year about that. And it's just amazing hearing from someone who is a New York Times bestseller saying like, why me is awesome, because I think you and I both go, why me? And I do this with a podcast from like, who wants to listen to this stuff? Like who wants to hear Alan Moore talk about financial advising stuff on a podcast, and yet people keep downloading it. So I guess somebody's listening. So it's funny that happened after the fact for you and not beforehand or during. It was more of just like, gung ho until you kind of hit that wall of like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, I was like, oh crap, this is going to get put out there. Is this good enough to be put out there? Because it was, the writing is something, like I said, it's always something I've enjoyed. And I write like I speak. I think I'm witty. I think I'm funny. And some other people think that I'm funny as well. Obviously, those are the ones who like still read my blog and my stuff. So the writing part is something that I've always enjoyed. But yeah, when I got to like, oh, this is done, it's going to get out there, then it was like oh no. And I think that's been like the most, like, you have to get really vulnerable when you put something like, I'm sure the same thing with you in the podcast, you get really vulnerable when you're putting yourself out there as something like a passion project. So, and the way
because it goes out and it is out there and there's nothing you can do.
Exactly.
So you went through and kind of organized. I'm curious about your process for organizing your thoughts for the 9 steps. I mean, is it kind of just your financial planning process that you turned into a book essentially? Or I guess, did you focus group, some ideal readers? Like, how did you come up with that? Because I feel like that's in many ways laying the foundation is probably the most important part of what you're, I guess, of the entire project.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took like the bigger financial planning topics. I also went through, kind of looking at my financial planning process and the questions a lot of my clients have. And I also actually looked back at my Newlywed Money Bootcamp. Like that was a big thing. I had gone through and drafted, some online courses for the online course, for newlyweds. And I went back through and looked at how I had drafted that. And so I basically, figured like, where do we all need to start? And, the biggest thing for anybody, I can talk about how you can budget and everything, but it always starts with like, what's our why? Like, why are you doing this? Why is money important to you? And, making it relatable. So one of the big things I do for our generation is talking about like, FOMO is a big thing, fear of missing out, and how that impacts us. We see a lot of things on social media and what our friends have and everybody's best selves. And so that's a big thing I talk about with money, especially with my clients and like my audience, is how is that impacting you? You seeing somebody else's business doing better than yours, or you seeing somebody else who has this nice car and is, do you really want those things, or are you just seeing what they have and not really what their bills look like? So, I launched the book with that basically. It's like, it's important. Like FOMO is a big thing. It can ruin your finances. And so I make it, I do that to make it relatable to our generation. And then from there, it really is, your goal planning, it's like, I think it's like, it's the introduction, it's goal planning, it's put your money where your heart is, which is the budgeting, it's debt pay down, it's, measuring your financial health, the insurance, the protecting your assets. Another big thing that I do talk about though, that's not necessarily in every personal finance book, but towards our generation, is optimizing your income. So I talk about side hustles. I talk about how to like go in for negotiating a raise, why it's important, like how nobody will look out for you like you look out for you. Those are big things. And then I close with a list of, I do investments as well. I talk about just like, what are some big things? Like I answer questions like everybody wants to know where they should invest their emergency fund. And I basically say like, that's for emergencies. Here's what an emergency is. Like you shouldn't invest it. I actually go through in parts of the book and offer, answer like some of my top questions that I get in terms of investments and explain how compound interest is your money's best friend. So those things are all basically, built in, and I just like layer step upon step. So by the end of the book, people can walk away with their very own financial plan. And if they don't have it done by the end of the book, I basically lay out the way that I organize my clients' action checklists. So I say, here are the 3 items I start with having every client do, open the savings accounts you need to open, then move into like, doing your 401k reallocations, like save the insurance and the estate planning for last, because that's usually the most time consuming. So I usually layer basically. So I basically walk them through what I do with my clients and let them know though that it's their responsibility to take action. I can give them all these tools and tips, but I can't make them change. And that's the biggest thing. Like the book is written in like a friendly manner, but it's very much written in like, you're responsible for your own life. Like I can tell you all of this stuff. I can push you, but I can't make you change. Like I can't make you save your money. I can't make you cut up your credit cards. Like that's all up to you to kick your anxiety to the curb.
Yeah. You can't do it for them unless they become a client.
Yeah. But all of that tone is geared towards my niche and geared towards my clients. So I wouldn't talk to like a 60-year-old that way, obviously, but it works for my ideal clients.
So one of the things you mentioned was your newlywed boot camp, which I can't actually remember if we talked about that on our last episode, but just so listeners know, it is a course for newlyweds to go through and kind of design their own financial plan. So this is a topic that you have a lot of content on just inherently because of the blog, because of the boot camp, because you work with clients and you've worked with, dozens and dozens of clients and done financial planning for, I guess, a decade now, not to make you feel old or anything.
Over a decade. Okay. I'm so old.
So, you know this stuff inside and out, but I can see that the organizing it and, get that foundation laid, figure out exactly what direction you're going to go, the tone you're going to take, who's your ideal reader, all of that is so important. And I think that's where I would say a lot of projects like this fail. I almost made the mistake with a podcast in terms of not defining some of that as well, just because as entrepreneurs, I think we tend to just jump in and see what happens instead of making a really clear plan. So did you do almost like a business plan for the book, or is it more just kind of, it was done, just not formally?
So I listed out the table of contents, and then underneath that, I had 4 to 5 bullet points that I wanted to address in each chapter. And then once I did that, then it was time to bring in somebody else to actually help me get that done. So that was the biggest thing. Was I know I've talked about writing a book for years, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. But I'm the kind of person who basically I almost need to I need to invest financially in the process to be able to hold myself accountable. So I brought in somebody to basically hold me accountable along the way. So she was also my content editor, and basically I was like, I am paying you to help to edit the content, and I am also paying you to be mean to me. Help to create a timeline and hold me to it. So it was I don't have my draft to you by the due date. You are you have full permission to email me and demand to know where it is or make sure that I'm making this a priority. And that was, that's basically it, because I so badly wanted to get it done, but life gets in the way. And when we're working in and on our business, there's so many other things. So that was a big thing for me. I got it to that table of contents in the bullet point line. And then I brought in somebody else to basically say, okay, here's the bullet points, and the table of contents and bullet points. And then she came in and she gave me a breakdown of a time frame. I was like, okay, I want this done by, the end of the year, basically. And so she basically assigned to me a chapter to get to her a draft of a chapter every week and a half, I think. So I would get her a draft of the chapter. She would edit it a few days later, and then I would review it and have the finalized chapter done within another few days. So we basically gave ourselves I think a week to 2 weeks for each chapter ish to kind of pull things together. And she helped to move that forward. And during that time frame, I actually leveraged her also in terms of thinking about how then to actually launch the book and how to, who to reach out to and those sort of things. So there was the business plan started to get created while I was actually writing the book, if that makes sense. Those things kind of overlapped.
No, that makes sense. I could see some people would want to have that beforehand. Some people would do it during it, but I was just envisioning, and I've never done this, so maybe this is lessons learned for all of us, that before you launch something like this, before you jump in, is to have some sort of business plan of here's how I'm going to market it. Here's my target market. Here are my goals. Here's the process. And it can be one page. It doesn't have to be, a 30-page proposal, but just to get really clear so that you can be, because you got to keep that stuff in mind, when you're writing, to be sure you continue to write to the right person.
Yeah. And that was a big thing for me, was writing to because I wanted it to be, first I was it needs to be gender neutral, I have males and females in my audience, even though Workable Wealth is kind of female centric. I still have males that come to me. And then as I got, so it was going to be 9 steps to Workable Wealth. The book name kind of evolved over time. And then as I was writing it, I started to realize this is, my tone just automatically is more female friendly. And, I explained diversification by comparing it to shoes in the book. And so I'm this is, men will understand, but it's definitely a little bit more female friendly. And so then when it came time, and so keeping all those things in mind, it was okay, what am I doing? What's my point? And who am I trying to educate? And then finally I was you know what? When it came time to design the cover for the book, I was I want a gold glittery dollar sign on the cover. That is I'm not going to pretend that it's totally still for men, but yeah, I want a gold glittery dollar sign on the cover. And it's that screams more to women, there's pink on there too. And so I'm you know what, I'm just going to embrace it. I was trying to please too many people. And while it's definitely good for both genders, I realized, mostly women are my audience, and go for it.
Kitsis and I have talked on previous episodes, and of course, listeners know that I'm going to say niche market and ideal client profile at least once, maybe 10 times in every episode. So we've already brought it up here, but it, is to draft your avatar. And, we did this with XY Planning Network. We did this with a podcast for our podcast production team that helped us launch the podcast. And you did this with a book, and that's saying, hey, this is who this is who it's for. And this is for men and women in their 20s and 30s that have professional careers. No. Your avatar is literally a person. It is a single person that you talk to, and you talk to that one person, everything you do and every topic you come up with. And sometimes you'll think of a topic and you think, oh, this would be great to include because it's personal finance. You're like, no, my avatar doesn't care about that because my avatar is not 50. They're 32 years old and have 2 kids.
Exactly.
And that's so hard with personal finance because we can write, we all went to CFP school, right? Like we have reams of textbooks of information that we could put into a book, but that's not what our readers want. They don't want to become CFPs. They just need to know the information that matters. And how do you cater that to exactly what they need from you?
Exactly.
Did you get that clear on an avatar? You had it in your head, obviously. Did you go through the process of like writing it down? I've rarely done that. So
I did that, when I actually, I don't know if we talked about this on my interview on episode 10, but I went through B School, which is Marie Forleo's B School, when I launched Workable Wealth, or right after 2014. I think it's when I went through it, and I launched in 2013. And then is when I kind of got clear on my client avatar. It was like, female, 20, like 30 something. Like, so I say I work with 20s, 30s, and 40 something. It's like, I know now it's like late 20s to early 40s. Like those are and I work with professional entrepreneurial women. Like those are the people who are typically finding me. And so like honing down on like those things, like I wrote it down at that point in time. I named her, I gave her all of her interests. I basically sketched out the whole thing. I didn't necessarily do that for this book because I have it so much in my mind now.
It was already there.
It's basically pretty ingrained now who my ideal clients are. And I still work with a lot of men and women, but they're usually married couples. Like they come together.
Yeah. And it's not to say that just because, the avatar for our podcast was male and for your book was female, just because somebody from the other gender comes along, it doesn't mean they're not going to get anything out of it. But it's hard whenever you think about like a big group of people, it's hard to think, okay, what do all of these people want to hear from me? You got to get really clear about who's the person you're talking to.
Exactly.
And so we joke our avatar's name is Michael because we have about 10 Michaels in the network, which is, I guess, generational just because of the age. I remember Brittany Castro in her interview, her avatar's name was Jessica. So she talked about that everything she did was to Jessica. So designing that avatar is a solid plan. But okay, so you set up with your editor. How did you find your editor? And if you already knew them, like, how would you recommend someone go about finding this kind of accountability partner editor, which I guess could be 2 different people if they couldn't find a single person to do both?
Yeah, it can totally be a different person. I learned this after the fact. So Kaylee was my content manager for quite some time with Workable Wealth. And so she was the one who helped me like manage the blog and create content and, with marketing type stuff. So there was a lot of stuff. Kaylee wore a ton of hats as she does in life anyways. So Kaylee was amazing to kind of help me through that process. And I found her through word of mouth at the time. And one of the things, and so she was totally invaluable. Like she was amazing through the process. But I would say in terms of finding somebody, just a couple things, like you can do word of mouth, asking other people, like finding out, like, through XYPN, that sort of thing, finding someone. Also, once I started to put the word out about, writing the book, and I needed the cover designed, and I needed the interior designed, that was stuff that Kaylee couldn't help me with. And so then I leveraged Facebook groups. And so there's tons of entrepreneurial focused Facebook groups out there right now. And so I would encourage you to get involved in those, just like anybody to get involved in those, because you'll learn a lot. You'll connect with others who are entrepreneurs, and you'll see what kind of needs they have, but you'll also kind of see what kind of like services they're providing. So when I started to put the call out for those things in the Facebook groups, I also came across like book editors and book coaches. And I had a good friend who launched her book probably a month or 2 ahead of mine, and she had a book coach. And so, we were emailing and keeping in contact, and she was sharing what she had learned with me throughout the process. So I would say, leverage like some of the resources through other podcasts that, you probably listen to if you're listening to this one, and looking to those communities and, putting a call out in a Facebook group to find people, and then asking obviously for, endorsements or recommendations or whatever from other people as well.
Yeah, you do not need to do this on your own. If you are not a skilled graphics designer, do not try to design a book cover.
Do not. Like, oh my gosh. And that was a big thing for me, was I put a call out for a book designer, and I interviewed people for the cover design. This is like kind of side note from, managing the process. But for me, it was like, okay, well, I chose to self-publish, and that's another thing we can talk about too, is like publisher versus self-publishing and why do that. But by choosing to self-publish, then I chose to leverage like Amazon's, create space options. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, how to do this. And so by interviewing like the cover designers, I also found somebody who specifically, she walked me through every detail of the process. She had used Create Space for her other clients. I mean, she was exactly what a financial planner like needs, because she gave me so many details, and it was what I needed for peace of mind. I needed to visualize the process and know what I was getting into. And, even from interviewing other people, like, yeah, they could design the cover, but like they weren't as upfront or clear about the process as she was. And so I signed on right away, just like by the way she presented the information to me. So I liked that I had options available. I had a list of 3 or 4 people that I interviewed, and then I picked one. And so you definitely don't have to do it alone. Like, there's other people out there who specialize in the process. And for me, it wasn't super expensive. It didn't seem very expensive for me anyways, like for the whole process. And then it was well worth it to save me the time and headache to have somebody else do these things for me.
I love interviewing people like that whenever they just nail the sales process, because I always look at that and go, how can I improve my sales process by what this person just did? Because like, I love a good sales pitch.
Yeah. It wasn't even a sales pitch. It was just like, she was like, here's everything you need to know about the process. And I was like, thank you. That is exactly what I needed. Like, that was I just needed to know like a detailed process. And I was like, it wasn't like, here's my hourly rate and I'll do this. It was like, no, here's everything you could expect. And I was like, I love it.
And I know advisors get iffy about doing things like content in general with blogs or podcasts, especially whenever you go to write a book, because they think like, why would someone hire me if all they have to do is read my book? They'll never hire me to be their financial planner. And we all know that's not true.
That's not true.
I mean, WebMD didn't replace the doctor. A book is not going to replace a financial planner. Honestly, if your entire value is listed out in that book, you're not much of a financial planner. Like, let's be honest. I mean, that's just
exactly.
the tip of the iceberg of everything that you do. And the same goes with hiring other experts. So, okay, so back to, you kind of created this plan. You have the drafts from your, and you're kind of going back and forth with your editor after you had hired Kaylee to help with this. Where was the content coming from? Was it all out of your head? Were you leveraging some previous content you had written for blog posts? Like, how did you write a chapter every week and a half? Like, it just seems like a lot of content.
I'm trying to remember this process. And so basically I had I don't know if this was Kaylee who had done it for me. I think, oh no, I did it myself. So once I had the outline done, what I did was I went back through my blog, basically all of the blogs that I wrote, and then I copied the title. I basically scrolled through all of the titles, and I copied the title, like a title that may apply to a certain topic under each like chapter, basically. Some of them didn't apply to any, but some, like if I had already written a post on disability insurance, that one under like the protect your assets one. If I'd already written something about like, compound interest, that one under investments. So I went through my blog and started to like kind of just like to pull corresponding topics to plug them in, just so I had like an overdraft of what to go through. And then when it came time to write the chapter, then I copied and pasted all of the content from like those blogs, relevant blogs, into like a Word doc, and then started to eliminate and pull things together. So it was a combination of blogs and straight from my head. Like the first few chapters, like the fear of missing out and the why and the introduction, those were all like from my head, like what you will get from this book, what you won't get from the book, like those were all out of my head. But then when it went into like the more tactical, like here's what you need to know about disability insurance, or here's like the types of retirement plans available to you, those things were already written out. So I leveraged that content. And so then it was kind of like, then it was basically like weaving everything together, doing like solid intros and outros, pulling out action items like for the money moves area. But that's kind of how it happened. So I'd say it was blog content. A lot of like the core financial planning topics had been covered in my blog. So those like any of like the real like tactical stuff has already been written about, like the how specific like percentages or numbers or how to calculate things was already in there. So those transferred over. And then like I added a lot of real life, or not like real life, I changed client names or what you're changing names type thing, but I added a lot of examples. That was how I tried to make it relevant, was like, Bob and Sue like came to me and here's how they like listed out their goals. Here's what they wanted to accomplish. Well, and then I used a lot of examples and I pulled a lot of like stats that weren't necessarily in the blog posts to begin with. Kind
of fill in around it, but it was some core content.
Definitely some core from the blog. Yes, definitely.
So how much time were you spending, would you say, per chapter, on kind of the initial draft and then going back and doing the final reviews after your editor got it back to you? Like how many hours are you spending a week at this point on the writing process?
I would say, you could probably say like a whole weekend. Like I remember spending like half day, I would spend like a Saturday morning in my office, like knocking out a draft and, like 5 hours or so. And then I'd spend then I'd, go back and then revise it, and then it would go, and then it would come back to me, and I'd spend like probably another morning, like going back through and making changes to it. So I'd probably say it would like a weekend, like it's a solid work day and a half, probably.
So if we're saying 10 to 12 hours per chapter, there's 9 chapters. I mean, we're talking about, let's call it 100 hours, maybe a few more, on top of it to get the content done. That's not bad. Like people think that this is going to take them, it's going to be a full-time job for a year to try to write a book, but you were able to accomplish it in a heck of a lot less than that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I ended up ahead of schedule for a while, and that was like, once we got ahead of schedule, then it was like, well, how soon can we finish this thing? So that's kind of like what got the ball rolling. But yeah, definitely once it started rolling and we started the editing process, and I really liked that we were ahead of schedule, because, it's one thing, like you have all the drafts and then you have to put them together. And then that was like a whole nother like editing and review process, making sure the flow is there and all of that. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't like really time consuming, because, and then one of the big things I always tell people too, when they're stuck writing blog posts, is like, talk it out, talk it out to Siri, like write a note, like to yourself, like as you're like the way you think about things, and, how you would explain something, and then email it to, have it transcribed and email it to yourself or whatever. Like that's a really easy way to get some content done that you don't have to really worry about typing, because a lot of people overthink it as well. So, yeah,
I can definitely see that being an issue. I'm definitely in that boat of overthinking things whenever you get into just way too big of a project that it feels too big. And then, looking back on it, you're like, oh, well, that wasn't nearly as scary as I made it out to be. But at the time, it was very scary.
Yeah. I mean, even like for me, like I'm writing a book, like that is, it's ridiculous. But all it was, and the same thing we tell our clients, it's a lot of little steps put together. Like that's basically how it got broken down and what made it feasible. Otherwise, same way we start our businesses. Like starting a business seems terrifying, but it's just a lot of little steps that culminate into one big thing.
And for anybody that's interested, we actually had Kaylee, who is the marketing manager of the XY Planning Network, who does some side work and I guess was independent before she became full-time with XYPN. So she did a lot of these types of projects. We had her on the show back in episode 27. So you can go to xyplanningnetwork.com/27 and listen to the interview there, where we actually talk about how she helped me write. Well, I shouldn't say helped. She wrote an ebook based on interviews that she and I did called The Virtual Advisor, and kind of similar process, I guess, on the back end. But ultimately, I'm not a good writer, and I knew that I couldn't sit down and do it the way that you did it, because if somebody said, write this chapter this week, it just wouldn't get done. But you mentioned, record yourself. And so that's actually what I do, is I record myself talking, because I prefer to talk over writing. And essentially, she just interviewed me and said, like, what do you think about this? And I would just talk for a while, and she would take down content. And ultimately, what came out of it was in my words, but just written so much better than I would have written it, because I'm not a good writer. So there are other ways of accomplishing this. If Mary Beth's, process doesn't appeal to you and you think like, okay, it's still overwhelming, if you can talk about something and you can form coherent structure around what you're looking to do, you can make a bullet pointed list like Mary Beth did and then talk it out. And I remember, and then we'll move on to the next question, but I remember there's a company, and I don't remember the name of it right now, but I can't
remember it right now either.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
There's a company that will help you write a book. They're essentially ghostwriters, but they interview you through the book writing process. And I remember it was 8 1-hour interviews. And I remember thinking, like, I can do that. Like, I could dedicate 8 1-hour time slots throughout the next 3 months to get a book written. And that's really actually what it takes, because you say a lot of words in an hour of talking. So
yep.
And so we're going to talk about the benefits and all that of writing a book, because I think that's what's really important. But this was one way of doing it. And I think this is probably one of the best ways, just because it is your words, but you're also a gifted writer, which helps in this process. But okay, so you mentioned earlier you decided to self-publish. And I think that that's something that hangs up a lot of people, because they don't know, okay, so I have this manuscript, I have all these words, what do I do with it? So why the self-publishing route? What does that look like?
There's a publisher. You can go like knock on doors and get a publisher and have somebody, put your book out there into the world. And essentially, I feel like you get it at Barnes & Noble. You probably get more eyes on it. Costco, maybe Target. It could end up in those places. I chose, and I talked to some publishers before, and they had reached out to me. Ultimately, I chose, though, to self-publish, because I I like learning like I like the creativity. I like having control. Like having control of the process. And so I really felt that while I could choose to have a publisher, but I couldn't change my mind on that. By self-publishing, I could change my mind. You can't go back on choosing a publisher, but you can go back on self-publishing, So I just felt by going this route, I would basically keep control of the process. I could learn, and I could always, choose a publisher for the next one, but I would at least retain the rights and everything to my book. And I just wanted to make sure that I just had control of that. So that's why I chose to self-publish. And so what it looks like ultimately is then you look to see what platforms are available. And to be completely honest, Amazon is the easiest platform to self-publish. They have, you can get into like the fees and what they charge, but ultimately as financial planners, we're not trying to make huge dollars off of our books. It's there for marketing. It's there for kind of lead generation and there to enhance our brands. So I chose to self-publish through CreateSpace, which is Amazon's self-publishing platform. And so ultimately you can upload your own PDF file and have them, you can go to them to design things. You can upload your own PDF file. There's different options available. But what I chose to do was hire somebody to design a pretty cover, to design a pretty interior. Then she uploaded it all for me to Amazon CreateSpace. And then it gets approved. And then from there, once it's approved for their platform, then you can, that's their printing platform. Then you can also then publish it to Kindle, or you could just go direct to Kindle as well. Those are two different platforms, actually. So I chose to do both Kindle and CreateSpace. But like I said, it was pretty easy. It's a matter of go in, sign up for CreateSpace. Your Kindle login basically leverages your same Amazon login. They both ask you for tax ID information. You basically plug in the name of your book. You get an ISBN number, at which you can get theirs, or you can choose to pay $10 for it and choose to pay $10, or else CreateSpace gets printed on your book. So just pay the $10. And then, and then everything gets uploaded. And then it's a matter of waiting 24 hours-ish for approval. You order a couple proofs, or you review your proof on Kindle, and then it goes live. Or you can choose to basically, that was another lesson learned. You can't pre-launch your hard copy book or your print book. You can't pre-launch that. You can't do pre-orders for that on CreateSpace. So that was a lesson learned for me, but you can do pre-orders for your Kindle version. So
interesting.
That was kind of a surprise. Once I basically put the book up there, and then I was like, oh crap, I can't do pre-orders for it. So I either had to launch it or just make it not available. But I had already been touting this launch date. So then the Kindle version was available for pre-order for a couple of weeks, basically, leading up to the launch.
This is fascinating to me because honestly, if somebody had said where do you go get a book printed, I would not have been able to answer that question. So literally Amazon just takes whatever you're providing them in terms of PDF and art for the cover, and they're literally printing the books for you. They have an end-to-end printing and I guess shipping as well, because it's going through all of Amazon's, servers and stuff.
Yeah, it's all print on demand, basically. Yeah, so a lot of the overhead to the author is minimized. That's the big thing. Is you're not ordering hundreds of books and trying to sell them on your own. You're basically people are ordering them through Amazon, and it's print on demand. So basically, I get X amount per book that gets printed, and I don't have to worry about shipping or anything like that. I don't have to do any of it, which way easier for me.
Heck yeah. I may have to bring somebody on, maybe when Carl Richards is on, because he went more the traditional publishing route. I have to ask him why, because if this is even an option, I guess there's some publicity and things like that. But this is amazing just in terms of the fact that you were able to get it all. I mean, you're printing books and it's not costing you anything. Obviously, you have to pay Amazon fees and all that, but you don't have to have 10,000 copies sitting in your garage and then manage all the shipping and the orders and all of that.
Exactly. We talked about, I think we talked about this offline before, I can get my own copies of my own books from them for $275 or something like that is what it costs me to get a copy of the book. And so if I were to go set up at a conference and want to sell them for $10, then I have to do the Square thing and take credit cards. But that's what I can order them for. But then when Amazon prints them individually, then I don't get that big of a cut from it though. I end up getting a little bit less. So
how much are you getting? Because how much is your book for sale?
So for $12.99 for the print, I'm getting, I think it's $5.35, $5.35-ish.
So close to half.
Close to half for the print. And then for the Kindle, which is priced at $9.99, I'm getting about $6 something per. So because obviously they're not printing, it's just deliver the ebook.
And maybe we should take a second to point out, because we talked earlier about the benefits of writing a book. You did not hear either of us say to make a bunch of money off book sales. No. Book sales is a really bad business.
Yeah.
And anyone can do the math to say if you're making $5 or $6 a book, even if you decided to do this all yourself or you raise the price a little bit to get up into more business book, level pricing, you're not going to make a full-time wage, writing books more than likely. And I would argue that the vast majority of books don't sell that many copies in general. So this is not about making a bunch of money. I mean, honestly, if you were breaking even and not making anything, you probably still would have done it. It's nice that you can kind of start covering some cost because you did have hard costs associated with writing the book. But listeners, don't get freaked out about the fact that, I'm not going to make any money. Like, no, you're probably not. The money's going to come because you have a business that you're driving clients to, that you're building a brand, and the speaking and the consulting that can come off of writing a book is just enormous.
Correct. Exactly.
So who all, kind of looking at your team, you've mentioned a couple of different folks. How big was the team that you formed in order to help you write this book? So you had Kaylee, you had the designer. Did you have somebody you said that helped with creative space? Like, who else was on the team?
So my designer was the cover designer, and then she did so well that she designed the interior as well.
Oh, perfect.
So I had her for both, and sometimes that will work, sometimes it won't. Sometimes you might need a separate cover designer and a separate interior designer. And a lot of people, I looked into using 99 Designs, like that's a cheaper version to get the cover design as well. I already had a good visual of what I wanted. So same person in my case for the interior and cover design. I had Kaylee to help me get through the content and reviewing the drafts. I also had, just kind of like a team member, my mother-in-law printed out and red penned the heck out of my book because she used to be a court reporter.
Nice.
So she's an unofficial team member, but oh my gosh, I learned every English language rule that she was to be a super successful court reporter. And so she is a stickler, and we were fighting on things. And I was like, no, I write like I speak. I'm not gonna do that. But it was really helpful. So having two sets of eyes on it, mine, Kaylee's, and my mother-in-law's, was actually very helpful. And then my husband reviewed it as well. So those were people who reviewed it to edit it. And then then Kaylee transitioned off as of the beginning of this year from, she kind of full-time XYPN, like everything else. So when Kaylee kind of got me through the content, and then I brought on a marketing assistant who helped me she has since kind of helped to put the launch timeline together for me. And she created a whole swipe file for me for the media. She created a press release for me. She created a lot of social media images for me. So she's been super valuable through the launch process as well. So I'd say those are the big team things. And then through the launch process, which we could probably have a whole nother hour episode on the launch process. Mm-hmm. But that basically I offered up free copies of the book for feedback and reviews. So that was part of it. But the actual team members were marketing assistant, Kaylee, and then my cover and interior designer, because she was the one who actually uploaded things to CreateSpace and created the EPUB file for me for Kindle. So she did everything for me. She was an all-in-one.
Don't be afraid to use your network. Other than the awkward, Christmas dinner with the in-laws when, you're fighting over getting ready, use those folks in your life because they want to help you. They want to see you succeed. And even if you have to pay them a little bit or buy them a nice dinner or a cruise, depending on how many hours they worked, they want to help. So how much would you say pre-launch? Because I know when it comes to launch and now the marketing budget is going to start, expanding. How much would you say it costs you to bring this book to market?
That's what I was trying to figure out the other day. I think it was probably, it might have been somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000. And that covers the cover design. The cover design was $400-ish. The interior book design was $600-ish. And then what I paid, I was trying to figure out what I paid for Kaylee during that time period, because that overlaps other things too. And then my marketing assistant, I think that was probably about $2,000-ish altogether.
That's ridiculous. I thought you were going to say $10,000 to $15,000.
No, probably about $2,000.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
Maybe a couple hundred over, maybe 22, 23. But that was probably it in terms of time. I think I remember paying, $600 for each girl for those
that's
the different things.
That's incredible. So I'm speechless. That's awesome. So if you spent $2,000, let's even round up to $2,500, you're making $5 a book. Essentially, you need to sell 400 to 500 books to have covered your cost and have kind of come out where, you at least didn't lose your shirt financially on this. And so we're 2 weeks after launch and you've sold how many books now?
We're 1 week after launch. This is 1 week today, actually.
1 week today, okay.
And with we were talking, part of using the book is for conference and kind of business cards as well. So I actually got a purchase order for a conference I'll be speaking at. So 1 week in, and I'm at about a little over 450, 460-ish.
Oh, that's incredible.
And, and when I launched, there's anxiety of how many will I sell? And obviously, I have a very specific niche. I'm not some best-selling author, but it became a new release. Part of the launch strategy was number one new release 2 days in a row. And then I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, I said basically, I was like, it'd be cool if I sold 500. Like that was like my short goal. Like 500 would be cool for the year is what I said when I was writing it. So I feel like that'll happen by like probably the end of the month with part of the launch strategy as well. So my stretch goal for the year is 2,500 is what I would love to have sold by the end of the year.
That's fantastic. So you've basically covered cost. You now are a published author, and now you get to leverage up the book. So you said something in there that I think is really valuable about using the book as a business card. Tell listeners what you mean by that.
Yeah. So now basically, one of the things that I've done through the Workable Wealth brand is I get, people reach out to me for speaking engagements along the way. And so now something that I can say is, here's my speaking fee. And then, if you wanted to, you can buy my book at X discounted rate or X rate, that's part of the, package as well, my speaking package. A lot of people, sometimes I have people reach out to me who aren't qualified now. And basically I'll say, in my part of my non-qualified consult template email now basically says, thanks so much for reaching out. Here's the type of client that I typically work with, but I want to make sure that you have value. So check out my book here, join my Facebook group here. Like I give them a lot of value. So basically, other advisors I basically can reach out to with the book. All of my clients got a signed copy mailed to them. They all received them this past week. They got signed copies in the mail. So it's just a great way to kind of enhance your brand for speaking for, potential clients, all of that now. And now as the part of the launch strategy is, getting interviewed, other podcasts and such. And so now I'll be on multiple podcasts over the next few months where I talk about the book and I talk about making smart money decisions. And it's not necessarily financial planner focused, but it's my target client focused. And so it's a great way for people to grab the book now. And in the book, the very beginning of the book, there's an invitation for them to join the Facebook group, also to opt into my list at workyourwealthbook.com where they can get all the resources that go along with the book. So basically there's the option there for them to, stay in front of me, for me to stay in front of them, basically. So I make sure to leverage those opportunities as well.
Just kind of bring them into your community so that they can get additional value, additional resources. So this is, an advisor, as advisors, we're not used to dealing with sales funnels. We don't talk about that a lot. We get referrals from centers of influence and existing clients, and then they become clients. I mean, that's been historically our marketing funnel. But I mean, we're talking about a pretty extensive marketing funnel that you've designed that now that we have the book, you can use that book in order to kind of spread your brand, get people to hear you speak and do consulting, things like that. But then you're kind of opting them into a Facebook group or a newsletter list if they choose to do that. Well, now they start getting your newsletter. They're going to get additional resources. They're going to get version 2 of the book or future books or future courses. And over time, when they decide they need a financial planner, they're going to call Mary Beth Storjahan with Workable Wealth because that's the financial planner that they know. And I think that's going to be the path for, to make up for the hundreds of hours and the gray hairs that you got writing, essentially pulling this book project together.
Exactly. And that's the whole, it's leveraging the different social media platforms. And, part of it was building that community ahead of time was, sending out free copies for review to a select number of people who agreed to then promote it to their audiences. And so that's kind of how I leveraged it as well. That's why I got in front of those multiple audiences. On launch day, I had, it was one of those things you joke about being all over the place, but I was like all over the place with shares on Facebook and people promoting it in their Facebook groups. And, it was really awesome to see the general excitement around the book as well. So that right there has, definitely enhanced my newsletter list already. That's seeing those numbers come in every day. Periscope is something new that I've been leveraging as well. And that's been really great for, the niching of like creative entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, like female entrepreneurs. Like that's been pretty cool as well as that response there. So just kind of reaching out and being able to talk about this new thing that's going on with the business and my experience there and tying it into money has been really, really cool.
And again, it's just kind of amazing how much, even if you didn't sell a single copy of this book, it's amazing how much street credibility you get whenever you can say a published author. When you get to put that in your bio, suddenly your speaking fees go up. You're just seen as more professional because it's like, oh, well, if they wrote a book, obviously they have something interesting to say. Of course, you had something very interesting to say before you wrote the book, but the benefits of the book are just so immense, whether it sells or not, but it is selling and I think it'll continue to sell. And again, we'll kind of continue to build out the brand and fill the pipeline for a long time when it comes to future clients. So looking back, so you've gone through the launch process, the marketing plan is going to be ramping up, and we'll have to have you back on at some point to talk through probably the actual launch and then marketing and what worked and what didn't work. Looking back, for somebody who's sitting in a position of there, where you were a year ago, like I have this idea for a book, not quite sure where to start. What advice do you have for them, kind of lessons learned that that you wish somebody could have told you? I guess, what did you learn through the process?
I learned definitely reach out to others. Like, don't be afraid to be like, oh, what was your experience? Like I said, I had a friend who went through it ahead of time, and I emailed her like multiple times, like, what did you do for X, Y, and Z? So it was really helpful having her kind of on hand. So I think, being able to reach out to people was big. And the other thing is, what didn't work for me and what kind of stressed me out is like, there's a bazillion things that you'll hear. And it was mostly like the launch strategy. And we could talk about that more later, but there's like a detailed like launch strategy, like build your launch team and have these things and go through this process. And oh my gosh, it was super overwhelming for me because I also have a business to run. So I think for me, like when you listen to any of like big podcasts that are out there, like Smart Passive Income or anybody else who is like, successful book launches, you can read about those anywhere. I've also found like, you got to do what works for you. Like I loosely followed that. I did some things. I didn't have a huge launch group. I had like my tribe though. So that was the biggest thing is like, remember like who your niche is and like, are you trying to market to everybody? You're not doing this to get famous. Like I'm not doing this to get famous. Like I realized my why is, I want to help people. That's really why I'm in business. And so remembering like, I want to help people. And if this book gets into X number of hands or whatever, like the credibility and that in general is big. So just remembering like, okay, maybe I need 10 to 15 people who will shout out from the rooftops instead of like 50 to 100 people. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a big thing. I spent a lot of time like thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to reach out to all of these people on all of these lists to like try and get in front of them. And to me, that kind of felt sleazy. And then I stopped and I was like, why am I spending time here? Like, I don't even really know these people. This is not going to feel authentic if I reach out to them. Like, let's focus on who do I know? Who are my contacts? Like, let's just go back to them. And so that's kind of where I went with the launch. I spent too much time spinning on all of the things that I should be doing. And then when I finally was like, just forget it and just focus on like providing value and reaching out to people who know you and who you've already like worked with or have connections with and ask them for their help. And that's what worked for me.
So in summary, don't should on yourself.
Don't shit all over yourself. Yeah, don't. I mean, that's the biggest, I've been saying that like for the past 2 weeks because I was shitting all over myself and I was like, getting super stressed out. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to be like Instagram famous or like Facebook famous. I'm just doing this to help people. And just by doing that and being like your authentic self. And that's why I always say in business too, like be your authentic self because you have your tribe, you have those people who already support you. And, clients rallied, like readers rallied and like really good friends rallied. And that was really awesome to see. Like there was nothing better. Like launch day was so cool because the book went out there, but it was so, so awesome to see the amount of people who rally around you, who like love what you do and support you. So that was cool to know that I felt like a smaller team, but it was people who were really excited and thankful for what I was putting out there.
It's so true. And just remember that, we all come across we all have these hangups, right? No one is just gifted and at the entire book launch process and wakes up one day and says, I'm going to write a book and goes through the entire process by themselves and launches it. Like, that's just not the way it works. Like we all have a hang up, I think. And there's a hurdle in everyone's way when it comes to putting themselves out there through content, whether it be podcasting or writing a book or blogging or even getting on social media, and figure out what your hang up is, and like what's stopping you. For you, it was having an accountability partner and having someone there that you had financially committed to be sure that you got this thing done. Yeah. For me, it's finding a way to not actually have to write, because if I had to write, it would never get done. But finding ways around that, like figure out what's your hang up, because we all have them. And I would be willing to bet all of them can be overcome. The only hurdle you can't overcome is you don't know what you're talking about. And I would argue most financial planners don't have that problem. So, well, I am so excited for the book. Other than in the show notes, of course. So tell listeners where they can go find the book if they are interested, a really valuable resource for their clients, because I'm always looking for things to tell people where to go if they need a really good personal finance book, because there's not very many out there. So where can they go find your book?
So it's called Work Your Wealth, 9 Steps to Making Smarter Choices with Your Money. And it is on Amazon, available in paperback and Kindle. And like I mentioned before, it's got the big gold glittery $sign on the front cover.
It is hard to miss.
So you will not miss it.
It is the only personal finance book with big gold glitters on it that I have seen. So
total bling.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be on to talk advisors through just what it takes to launch a book, because I think it's such an exciting project to witness. And I think it's something that is going to do some amazing things for Workable Wealth, the financial planning side of things. So thank you for being willing to come on and share your expertise.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited for the launch of Mary Beth's book and thankful that she took the time to talk us through the book writing process. I know it can seem daunting to take on a project as big as writing a book, but Mary Beth was able to do so right after having a baby while running a solo firm. So if she could find the time to carve out, I bet you can too. She really is an inspiration to advisors to chase your dreams and to really follow through on projects that you're passionate about. Remember to join our VIP community to be able to ask our members, guests, Kitsis and I, as well as other listeners, questions in the VIP community and get everyone's perspectives at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.